Don't worry. I'm not gonna die.
Whose head is on the chopping block in Phase 4 of the MCU? I mean, we're now entering a brand new era where the fresh-faced superheroes are slowly replacing the old guard, which means the universe just might not be big enough for everyone. Add in the fact that with the concept of the multiverse, nobody who bites the bullet would actually stay that way since there are infinite other versions, and it all equals the strong possibility of saying goodbye to some beloved characters in Phase 4. Which character on this list would hurt the most to lose? And how exactly would all these characters meet their end? Well, that's what I'm discussing today, so let's get into it right now. So let's start with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Right off the bat, fans have been speculating that not all the Guardians will make it out alive by the end of the trilogy for a few reasons. For one, James Gunn has said that the third film will definitely be the end of this version of the Guardians on the big screen, and there are currently no plans for a fourth one. Throw in the fact that when someone asked him if someone will perish in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, he simply said yes. Now, of course, that sent the internet racing and theorizing about who could bite the bullet in the third film. But also remember, James Gunn is a little goofy. Think of all the nameless casualties in the previous two movies, and you can bet the same thing will happen in the third film. So Gunn just could have been giving a cheeky reference to the fact that yes, someone won't make it out alive in the third film, but it's also not necessarily a main character. With all that said, let's discuss the Guardian most likely to perish, just in case, and my money is on Rocket Raccoon. Rocket is a fan favorite character who's had quite the incredible arc. He's crass, abrasive, straightforward, and more than a little selfish, and that's gotten him into trouble with his makeshift family. His whole arc in the second movie was about how he and Yondu were actually incredibly similar in that they pushed people away so that they wouldn't get hurt in the long run.
I know who you are, boy, because you're me.
By the end of that film, Rocket learned the true meaning of family and developed an even stronger bond with the Guardians. But then what happened? Thanos showed up, threw Gamora off a cliff, and then snapped away all the remaining Guardians except for Nebula. Think of that mindset for Rocket. He finally accepts that this new family won't abandon him, only for them to be cruelly taken away for 5 years. That's gotta hurt. Now that everyone is back and presumably looking for Gamora, I could see a situation where the previously selfish Rocket sacrifices himself in order to save the family he just got back. He knows the pain of losing everyone, and he'll work the hardest at reuniting Gamora with the rest of the Guardians to restore their family, even if it costs him his life. And I think this makes sense. But on the other hand, I wouldn't be surprised if Disney wanted to keep the character alive so that they could spin off Rocket and Groot into their own separate adventures later. Come on, that's totally a Disney move, right? Is it finally time for Hawkeye to knock his last arrow? Yep, that's right, I googled that, and the term for putting an arrow on the string is called knocking, which is why I'm extremely upset Hawkeye has never made a knock-knock pun. Anyway, Clint Barton has had a fascinating journey throughout the MCU. He started as the butt of everyone's jokes, and many questioned his usefulness to the team while he stood next to the Asgardian gods, super soldiers, giant green rage monsters, and Iron Men. But over time, he won a lot of people over. And now that he's seemingly genuinely happy and reunited with his family, would Marvel be so cruel in eliminating him? Well, let's look at the facts. Hawkeye is getting his own Disney Plus show where Clint will find and train a new bow-wielding protege in Kate Bishop, who will presumably take over the Hawkeye persona by the end of the series. Now, usually in these types of stories, the old mentor passing on secrets to a young, enthusiastic protege doesn't fare too well. Usually, mentors are eliminated near the end of whatever story is being told, forcing the new protege to find inner strength and step up to become the hero. But as much as thematically it would make sense for Hawkeye to finally perish, since there was a time where Jeremy Renner was actively campaigning for the character to be written off after that disappointing arc in the first Avengers movie, it would be tough to see Clint not get the overall happy ending with his family after his rough time in Endgame. But never say never. Okay, this one is a bit tough, but I think Jane Foster could perish in the MCU. And I think there's a few ways to do this. We know that Jane will return in Thor: Love and Thunder and become the Mighty Thor, but we don't know the exact circumstances yet. In the comics, there's a complicated cancer storyline regarding Jane Foster, and some version of that could be adapted in the next movie, where technically Jane does pass away, but then is resurrected to become the Mighty Thor. Yes, that's a bit of a loophole in that it's presenting a scenario where she passes passes and then immediately is brought back, so I'll provide a few different scenarios. What if our Jane Foster succumbs to cancer, leaving Thor heartbroken at yet another loss? But then a Jane from a different universe who wields Mjolnir and goes by the Mighty Thor suddenly shows up to cause a little chaos and tension. Then you have a story where Thor has to get used to this new version of the character after having lost his own Jane. Maybe this is a way to ease the audience into the idea that the multiverse will give options for different versions of the same characters, but drive home the point that just because they're the same character, it doesn't make them the same person. We know mutants are coming to the MCU sooner rather than later, and with the multiverse continuing to expand, it's most likely that they'll be in a different universe and eventually cross over. It's just easier that way. But what does that have to do with Wanda Maximoff and her potential demise? Well, a few things actually. We know Wanda is on the hunt for her kids after the end of WandaVision, and they'll most likely be in a different universe. We also know that Wanda is slowly becoming the most powerful magic user in existence, and story-wise, it's going to become more difficult to write stories using her when her skills can reshape reality on a whim. So here's my pitch. While searching for her children, Wanda finds that they're in a universe which features mutants. But this particular universe is in danger of collapsing. Wanda sacrifices herself by unleashing the full power of the Scarlet Witch to merge that unstable universe with our universe, which effectively saves her kids and also brings over the mutants to our main universe. The reason I think this is a fun outcome is because it's a twist on the classic House of M storyline, where Wanda's got rid of all the mutants on Earth just by speaking. So how cool would it be if in the MCU she's actually the one responsible for bringing them in properly to our main universe? Some of you savvy viewers might see Tony Stark's name and think, hey, wait a minute. But bear with me a second. Phase 3 ended with Tony Stark's epic sacrifice, and then Phase 4 introduced What If, which showed that pretty much in every universe, Tony Stark will perish eventually. Sometimes he's betrayed by Killmonger, other times he's turned into a zombie. Those are the breaks. Anyway, to keep up with this theme, I think more versions of Tony Stark should be introduced in Phase 4 via the multiverse, and we can show them being eliminated in a variety of different ways. Like, if rumors are to be believed, Tom Cruise will have a cameo in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness as another universe Tony Stark, which is a cheeky reference to the fact that Tom Cruise almost played him. To introduce him only to have him bite the bullet immediately would both show how dangerous the multiverse could be, how heroic our Tony actually was, and show that the multiverse just really hates Tony Stark overall. I've already discussed Rocket, so I want to turn the attention over to the other Guardian who is most likely to not make it out alive in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and that's obviously Drax. It's no secret that Dave Bautista has said he's getting a little tired of playing the metaphor missing invisible man. It's a lot of work to always be both shirtless, incredibly jacked, and to go through the makeup process every day, so there's a good chance Volume 3 will be the last time we see this character. Could the character be written off peacefully, or does Drax have to shuffle off this mortal coil forever? Well, it depends. There's rumors that the plot of the third movie will see Drax discover that his daughter is still alive. Now, take that with a grain of salt, but if that's true, then the two could be reunited and ride off into the sunset together. But if that doesn't happen, then really the best ending for Drax would be to sacrifice himself to save his new family and end up having a true warrior's demise that he's always wanted. Now, for this entry, note that I'm saying just the Hulk could perish and not his human alter ego. That's right, I think the Hulk could potentially be done in the MCU. We know that in Endgame, Banner and Hulk become Professor Hulk and was severely injured after snapping everyone back. We also know that Banner is back to being in his human form as evidenced by Shang-Chi. So what's happening there? Well, what if the Hulk is suffering long-term effects of the snap and doesn't have that much longer to live? Like, what if there's some mumbo-jumbo about how all the gamma radiation is being sucked from Bruce's body, and the Hulk doesn't have that much longer to be around? That could provide a heartbreaking goodbye between Bruce and the Hulk, because really, the MCU has mismanaged that entire character arc, so at least end it by having the two be able to communicate and have some type of final conversation, please. Talos looked like a big villain when he was first introduced in Captain Marvel. I mean, he was played by go-to bad guy Ben Mendelsohn, for heaven's sake. Of course we thought Talos was evil. Though in a twist, it turns out Talos was actually the good guy who just wanted a safe place for his family and his people and ended up forming a long-term partnership with Nick Fury. Now Talos is the lead for an upcoming adaptation of Secret Invasion, and I don't necessarily like Talos' odds of survival here. He's a well-liked side character with a lot to lose, which could put a big target on his back. With all the shape-shifting that's going to take place, I wonder if people will turn against Talos and make a tragic mistake. Hey, anything can happen in Phase 4. How do you hurt the most powerful hero in the universe? You go after what they love. The upcoming Captain Marvel sequel will see Captain Marvel team up with Miss Marvel and the newly powered Monica Rambeau to fight a presumably galactic threat. And that's why I'm worried overall about Monica. Yes, she's now Spectrum thanks to WandaVision, but if the sequel is going to up the ante in terms of stakes, it might mean that she doesn't make it out alive. Think about it, Captain Marvel is incredibly powerful, and she knows it. So what would happen with her character if she fails to save someone close to her? Yes, the idea of a character's demise acting as a plot point for the main character's arc has been problematic in the past, but I think it's important to show that Captain Marvel isn't invincible and can overall learn from that. Though, to continue off that last entry, maybe Monica's story doesn't have to end to have this effect on Captain Marvel, and another character can take her place instead. Maybe it's time for Nick Fury to finally check out of the MCU for real. I mean, yes, it looks like Samuel L. Jackson will keep playing this role forever if they let him, but does Fury have a natural endpoint coming up? He's building his space defense station, and maybe that will be his one last contribution to Earth before going out like a hero. Not only would his demise affect a ton of people and create a power vacuum that could be explored in future movies and TV shows, but after Secret Invasion and the Marvels, it feels like there's not much else the character could do. Wong has always been a fan favorite side character, and he's only gotten more popular since showing up in Shang-Chi singing karaoke. He's the logical one who provides valuable audience exposition, as well as the one to tell Doctor Strange how dangerous something is. Well, it's these types of characters who we have to be worried about. His demise in Multiverse of Madness would be a huge blow to fans, but also wouldn't affect the story that much. Or could Wong's end come elsewhere? We know he's currently doing some type of training with Abomination. Could this be setting up Wong as a member of the Thunderbolts? That would be interesting, as you could have mostly all supervillains on a team and then have Wong be the one who keeps them all in line, which would mean that if he was to suddenly become unalive, it would thrust the Thunderbolts to question if they're heroes or villains. Sure, that's like Suicide Squad, but it would still be awesome to see. Before a variant of him showed up in the Loki TV show, we were all aware that Jonathan Majors was cast as Kang the Conqueror in the third Ant-Man movie. Now it looks like Kang will be the big multiversal threat that will unite the Avengers once again, but Kang certainly has giant shoes to fill in the big bad department. In order to really make a statement and prove why he's scary and ruthless, I think Kang needs to make an impact in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. He could do this by eliminating Hank Pym. That's right, not only would that be a brutal blow to our heroes and establish Kang as the real deal, but also Hank's character arc is mainly done at this point. He's turned from grouchy old man to grouchy old man with a heart of gold, who's also mended fences with both his child and his long-lost wife. The team doesn't necessarily need him anymore now that they have Janet, so with all that, I would say Hank's time is up in the MCU. Baron Mordo started off as Doctor Strange's friend and ally, only to turn against Strange and everything he stood for by the end. It was teased that Mordo would be the big bad for a future movie, but do we really have time for him now? So much has happened since that first Doctor Strange movie, and the original director eventually dropped out due to creative differences, which means whatever original trajectory they were on with Doctor Strange might not be what we get now, and that makes me really nervous for Mordo. Although he's a great character, he just might not fit as well into the new Doctor Strange arc. Like, would it really make sense for Doctor Strange's sequel to deal with the infinitely terrifying multiverse, and then the third movie deal with a confrontation between him and Mordo? That seems like a step down, so I wouldn't be surprised if Multiverse of Madness somehow includes Mordo in a small role, only for him to be taken out by a bigger threat. I'm not saying that will definitely happen, and I'd much rather see Mordo join the Thunderbolts or something, but every time I want something in the MCU, it doesn't always pan out, so I'll just be here worrying about Mordo's fate for a bit. Look, I love Kraglin as much as the next guy, but I seriously worry about this dude's safety. I mean, he's just been handed one of the most powerful weapons in the entire galaxy, and you think he won't end up stabbing himself with it? That arrow mohawk is no joke. Like, it rips through people like paper, and one false move and you're a goner. Do you think Kraglin has the same reflexes as Yondu in order to catch the arrow? I don't think so. If I was Kraglin, I'd put that mohawk in a drawer and never open it again until you've mastered whistling and catching things. I want to end this by talking about a character who hasn't been introduced yet but would be awesome to see. We've spent so much time on Asgardian gods in the MCU that I would like to see a bit of a shakeup by introducing the Greek gods, in particular the head honcho himself, Zeus. And while I do think Zeus would make a worthy adversary for Thor in a future movie, I'm not sure I like Zeus's chances in Phase 4. Thor Love and Thunder will feature Gore the God Butcher, which means he kinda needs to butcher some gods. A way to establish the threat of Gore is just to have the villain mow through all the Olympians, including Zeus. We'd basically get a sequence like the God of War video game, but just with Christian Bale's Gore front and center. How awesome would that be? Watch out, Zeus!